Our gospel lesson this morning is taken from the book of John, chapter 15, verses 1 through 8. Hear now the word of Jesus as he is speaking with his disciples. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. But if you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given to you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Not too long ago, an email was sent to me that listed several things that mothers might actually want to have for Mother's Day. And so this morning, if you have not yet bought your mother a gift, pay close attention. You may get some ideas. What do moms really want? For our teenagers to come home and announce, hey, Mom, I got a full scholarship and a job, all in the same day. A 5-pound box of chocolate that won't add on 20 pounds after you eat it. To have my 14-year-old daughter answer a question without rolling her eyes at me. To be able to step on a plane with my toddlers and not have someone moan, oh no. To be able to stay in bed all day and simply just ring a bell. And to be able to have a yes day, meaning anything I ask of my children will be answered with a yes and a smile. I wonder this morning if you know the story of Mother's Day and how it actually began here in North America. It started back in 1870 with Julia Ward Howe, who you may remember as the person who wrote the words to the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Julia was becoming distraught by all of the death she saw around her being brought about by the Civil War. And so she decided that it might be a good idea to call together all mothers to come in an act of protest, to protest their sons killing the sons of other mothers. She proposed that this Mother's Day be an international celebration of harmony and peace, and that it actually take place on July 4th. Well, as you can imagine, not many people were interested in switching Independence Day to Mother's Day, and so June 2nd was actually designated for the celebration. At first, the idea caught on, and by 1874, women's groups in 18 major cities were gathering together to celebrate Mother's Day. But as the years began to pass, it started to dwindle, and women no longer saw a need to really come together to protest the act of war. Julia became disappointed, but she had no idea at that time what a huge seed she had planted in the heart of a group of women in West Virginia. That group was led by Anna Jarvis, and the women there were beginning to realize that the nation was having a huge problem. Families had been severely divided when brothers, sons, and fathers had gone off to fight on opposite sides of the war. And so this group decided maybe they could adapt the original idea of Mother's Day and turn it into a time for reuniting family and friends who had been alienated from one another. And once again, the idea began to catch on, and by 1908, Anna's daughter started petitioning state governments to make Mother's Day an official holiday. Her hard work was finally rewarded, and in 1914, President Woodrow Wilson declared the second Sunday in May as the national observance of Mother's Day. And every year since, the President of the United States has made an official proclamation of this holiday just days before the flowers, the candy, and the gifts all start to be delivered. I find it really interesting that the origin of Mother's Day has so much in common with our gospel lesson this morning. For just as Mother's Day began with the purpose of reuniting people together in love, Jesus' words in John 15 are placed directly in the middle of two bookend passages, which clearly state that we are to love one another. As our passage begins, Jesus and the disciples are in the upper room, and it's the night before he is betrayed. It's Maundy Thursday, so to speak. They've just finished eating the Passover meal, and Jesus has washed their feet, when suddenly he begins to speak his farewell words to them. Have you ever been with someone who's close to you, who's about to die, and who wants to tell you some final things? Come a little closer, that person may say. And as you lean in to listen, you know that you'll do your very best to remember these words for the rest of your life. Now, imagine that the person who is speaking to you is Jesus. How closely would you pay attention to what he is saying? How long would you contemplate his words and how they impact your life? I'm not really sure that on this night the disciples knew that these were Jesus' final words to them. But as we read the passage today, we know. And so I think these words definitely warrant our close attention this morning. Directly before our passage begins, Jesus invites the disciples to rise and to go out with him. And then he begins his analogy using a vineyard. Some scholars wonder if Jesus actually took the disciples on a little bit of a field trip on their way to Gethsemane. They wonder if he took them to a vineyard so that he might actually have an object lesson, being able to point to the various parts of the vine as he discussed it. We don't really know if he did or not, for the passage is very ambiguous as to where they went or if they even responded to Jesus' request. What we do know, though, is that in keeping with his creative teaching style, Jesus' words invoke images that are very easy for us to visualize. And certainly they would have been thought-provoking for the disciples as well. After all, vineyards were a huge part of life in Palestine, and in the Bible they can be traced all the way back to the story of Noah.